Hey everyone, it's nice to see some familiar faces here. Hi Kyle. Hi Sarah. Hey Laura.
Hello.
Still
Hello,
camera
hello.
off. And who else here? Okay. Oops. All right, let me pin our speakers. And we're gonna pin you and you and let's give everybody another minute or two to get here. Laura, I'm still not seeing you.
I'm working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And
Hi.
hello. Okay, ready to go. Let me just pin you to the front. All right. Okay. All righty. I think we are ready. So first of all, thank you everybody for being here today. I will be sending out a recording of this afterwards, so you have it along with my take-home notes. A little bit about us and the way I approach things, which is how we've designed this panel to work. Workstream is all about promoting organizational efficiency and helping organizations get to where they need to be. I very much believe that sometimes the barrier to that is a little bit of education, a little bit of support and community and accountability. So we've designed these webinars to hopefully give you clear action items and knowledge. And you are in a community of supporter people, although I don't know how many of you know each other, to help you implement what you're taking and learning. We want this to be interactive. We want you to have action items. We want you to walk away looking at something a little bit different than you did before. I will also be following up in a week via email with the survey to see how many of you actually did some of the suggestions that we had. This is hopefully going to serve as a little bit of an accountability piece so that you can say, yes, I did this, and you have a deadline that it needs to get done within a week. So that brings in a little bit of our approach. So the way we're going to structure this is that I'm going to first introduce you to our speakers who are all experts in their fields in different ways. We try to get a little bit of variance in people's direct experience so that we can get different perspectives. And then we're going to go through the sections. So the core things that we're going to be talking about are who everybody is, obviously, the basics about what organizational strategy is, and really understanding what a good plan should look like. Then we're moving into the success section. This is where we'll talk more about the KPIs, OKRs, and tracking them, and then competing priorities, too much going on. How do we balance all that? And then wrapping up with action items, and then we'll leave off with question and answers. During this session, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the end. And thank you for those who submitted your questions in advance. We have those and we will get to those either as we go along or towards the end. Any questions before we jump in? All righty. So with that, we will start. So hopefully whoever doesn't know me, I'm Dina, and I started Workstream. And again, we're focused on organizational efficiency and providing the operational support to help orgs get to where they want to be to do more impact with fewer resources. That is our hope. I measure things in terms of return on impact, since it's hard to measure return on investment. Sarah, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I am Sara Carrillo. I am in Peru. and I am a OKR coach and project management professional. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Sarah. And Kyle. Kyle, you are up.
Sorry. Yes, I'm Giancarlo. I'm connecting from Italy. I'm a teacher, but I have side plans that I would like some support
Okay,
to implement.
thank you. Debica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Kashom. I am a principal at Marigold Strategy. We do strategic planning, organizational development, and board governance. And I'm also an executive nonprofit coach.
Okay, and Kyle Gracie.
Hey everyone. Excuse me. Hey everybody, this is Kyle Gracie. I am a strategy consultant with TGS.
All right, and Laura, we still can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yes, I'm very devastated that you can't see me. I'm trying to fix it on my end, but I'm Laura Richards with Scale Up Consulting Group. We help businesses grow and thrive through strategic planning and accountability services.
Okay. All right. So with that, let us take it over to our topics. So the basics. So quick question for everybody, drop in the chat. What is your biggest strategic challenge that you are facing right now? And while they're doing that, question for our panelists, what do you think a good strategy should look like? Like, what would be the basics if you would have to describe it in 3 sentences, maybe?
So it should be tied to your mission. It should be measurable so you can actually figure out if you're accomplishing it.
Mhm.
And it should be something that you are periodically able to check in on along the way.
Okay, so it's actionable, it's measurable, it's something that's focused towards doing. Okay. Demika, what do you think?
I would say it's doable. So you have your goals set out and it's not too much, it's not too little, and it's actionable. So that's broken down into action steps that you can take. And then it's really taking in the multiple perspectives. So it's not just, the staff and the board, but ideally people outside of those two demographics as well. So community, clients, grantees.
That makes sense. Okay, so looking at the answers that are coming in, there's a lot that you're all trying to do, which is great. So how do we optimize it? And I think really the key is going to be here as a theme I'm hearing already is really making the strategy actionable. How do you take it from theory and turn it into something more measurable? So before we jump into the KPIs thing, question for you all. What are the number one mistakes you see that people should be avoiding? And again, with that, do you have any suggestions about what the outcome of a strategic plan should look like besides for being actionable? We already talked about that. So Sarah, I'll let you lead with that one.
Thank you, Dina. Well, for me, the one big mistake that I saw in the organization with the strategic planning is that sometimes we have a lot of needs, a lot of pains in our organizations, and we try to cover everything. But if you don't focus, it's difficult to give to follow up all the initiatives, all the projects. So as OKR coach, I think that less is better to have this monitoring, this following up. So less is more.
Okay, so we are choosing to pick fewer things in order to be able to focus on those and do well. And that echoes a lot of what I tell people all the time. You have so many things going on, but choose some. We can't do everything, whichever
Right.
one ties into your mission more. Laura, what would you say the mistakes you see people making, but also what would you think the first most important step or suggestions you might have?
Sure. I would follow right along with what Sarah said. I completely agree that when you have a focus that's too broad, it's very hard to measure what success is. So really knowing your why, narrowing your focus, and then creating priorities that you judge your progress by. So we're going to get into metrics, but really it's not just metrics. It's a very, very clear vision and mission, narrowly communicated.
Now, talking about mission and vision, I know, Laura, that's one of your areas of specialty and theory of change. Everybody needs to have a mission and a vision and a theory of change, and it needs to be clearly articulated, and it needs to be something that everybody in the organization is in alignment with. If not, I see we have somebody mention that also, you end up, it's hard to make change happen. It's hard to make a strategy that's actionable because you don't have everybody in alignment. So back to you, Laura. How do you get everybody in alignment on the mission?
Well, I think just like we were saying, it goes to clarity. So, leadership has to be clear on what the major priorities are, and then they have to communicate that through every layer, and in every goal. So everybody knows this is why I'm doing this is what it relates back to, and this is how we're moving the mission forward from a very on an execution level all the way to a really high level why.
Okay, so if we're going to say our steps to creating a good strategic plan, we want to get everybody in alignment on the mission.
100%.
Okay. And on the mission. I'll send these notes out. All right, Kyle, do you have any thoughts to add on here?
Yes, just when you are, one of the ways you get alignment is either you're developing your mission, actually involves the whole team in that development, just a few people putting it together, then it's going to be a lot easier for people to be misaligned. And on the other hand, when you're bringing new people into an organization that has a clear mission, or hopefully has a clear mission, build that into your recruiting, build it into your onboarding, make sure people are getting that mission as part of their introduction to the organization, and not something that they're trying to figure out after they've already been on board.
Okay. That is a very good point. So we have getting everybody in alignment on the mission, and then I think somebody also had a question about how do we get everybody in alignment, being part of that process, including them. In general, when we want change to happen, making people part of the process is much more likely for the change to propagate. Before we move on to the KPI OKR section, Devika, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, I'd say it's important to build trust and have buy-in from all of the different people who are going to be impacted and part of the work. It can also slow things down if everybody's involved at the same level and at different levels of the organization. And so buy-in is very important. I don't think everybody necessarily thinks that they need to make the final decision. And so being very clear and transparent about getting input from as many people as possible, but not everybody's necessarily going to be making the final decision because that's going to slow things down. And as long as there's transparency in that process and you're taking in people's feedback and perspectives and clear on how the decisions are going to be made, I think that goes a long way towards building trust.
That sounds good. So now that we know where we are getting to, so we're starting from where we are right now, and we have a long way to go to get to where we want to get to. Now we're going to go through the process of how do we get there? And that is very much our metrics. When we take a step back, say, this is the change we want to make happen, then it's how do we do that? What are we measuring? What does success look like? Sarah, why don't I can you give an introduction why accountability metrics, KPIs, OKRs are important for implementing the strategy?
Yes, of course, because if we can't measure, we can see the improvements. So if for us, for example, in my case, I use OKRs. So what is the pros of OKRs? That you can see clearly what is your goal, your big goal, and then what are the key results that you want to get that for that goal. And every key result has initiatives or projects, no? Maybe could be a lot of initiatives on projects can do an key result, and then a lot of key results have goals. And why is important? Because in OKRs we have maximum between 3 and 5 goals or key results, and it allow us to focus. No, I think that is a good way to focus and to measure the improvement. Every step has a percentage or maybe a number, but you can see that this advance, this step by step, and you can reinforce what is needed to get the main goal.
Okay, thank you. So in summary, the OKRs, which are the objectives and key results, they help you,
Mhm.
they are the how. They are what are you doing that creates whatever your mission is. So action item number 1 is let's take a minute to write down what your organization's mission is. What are you trying to be out there? Why is the world a better place because you exist? So take a minute, drop it in the chat. It will be helpful for the conversation or not. That's action item number 1. And then from that, we're going to formulate and think about
Mhm.
what kind of metrics we can be looking at. So our panelists are going to give you some guidance on how to create those OKRs, and then we'll practice creating them. All right, so panelists, tell me, what do you think are good ways to come up with? I'm going to ask you, this is going to be your next action item, is to define your top 3 to 5 metrics that we're going to go through. So as our panelists are talking, think about it, see if you can develop them. Devika, you want to go next?
In terms of how to help them develop their metrics.
What are key things to track?
Yeah. So one thing that people often do is they track what's really easily trackable. And that's not always the best route to take. So really sitting and thinking about what you're doing, what your goal is, what the change that you want to see is out in the world, and writing that all down, so that you can then kind of work backwards to see if there's some way to track that, but not starting with the things that are most trackable, because that may not be as aligned with where you want to be going in terms of the impact that you're having.
That is a good point. Laura, what do you think? It's nice to see you now, so thanks for joining on your phone. But now you're on mute. Okay.
Okay, sorry about all the technical problems. Had to join with my phone. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a couple things. It's in terms of measurement, where are we going? Where we are, where we want to go, that gap in between, that's where all of your metrics will come from. What gets us closer to our core goal? So those are the questions I would be asking. And then the other thing to think about as the leader is stepping back and getting altitude over the whole situation about what you're trying to build, and make sure you're spending your time in a way that relates back to your priority. So there's both kind of I would say, a leadership metrics that need to happen in addition to the ones for the team to account back to the larger strategy and metrics.
Okay. Thank you. Kyle, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that they are relevant for the time period that you're looking at. So there's a difference between metrics for 1-year goals versus 1-quarter goals. So make sure that they're things you can actually make progress on over the time period that you're considering. And then are they core to the actions that or the things that you're trying to accomplish? So again, they might not be as easy to measure, but are they directly related to activities you are going to be undertaking over that period of time?
Okay, so let's use some examples because we just talked a lot about theory and now we want to make it actionable, right? So let's start thinking about what metrics look like. Sarai, I'm going to pick on you just because we've talked, so I know a little bit more about your organization, if you don't mind. But your mission is to provide a path to self-sufficiency to prevent end homelessness and affordable housing solution in Howard County. That's where I live in Maryland. So that's great. What are some key metrics that we can use to see if Sarai's program is doing well? Does anybody have any ideas? Our panelists, you can provide ideas. Or people in the chat, you can provide. Sarai, you can provide yours too.
It could be something like people served, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So number of people who are going through the programs. Okay. What might be another one?
I can share a couple of what we do track. So we do track individuals served. We also do by households, so individuals and households. How many households get rehoused? How many people stay in stable housing in the past 12 months? The amount that's provided for assistance for low-income households. Evictions prevented, hours of case management, just to name a few.
Okay, so those are good. So then I would challenge you to then pick what are your top 5. Yeah, point in time counts of unhoused people. Those are also good metrics. Now, turning back to the panel, what might be some bad or non-helpful OKRs at this point that people are like easy to pull numbers? Now, there's a difference between OKRs and KPIs, and maybe that should be the next question. What is the difference between your OKRs, your objectives and key results, versus KPIs, which are key performance indicators? And how do we differentiate? I think people get them confused a lot. So how do we make that differentiation? Sarah, what do you think?
Well, in my case, I think that OKRs in general don't replace KPIs. No, you can
No.
have in your organization both. I saw different organizations that have both, but in general, I think that OKRs is like you must to serve a more strategic purpose than KPIs because the OKRs link the outcomes to our organization mission. And meanwhile, KPIs can measure a specific process of the organization. So it is more strategic purpose than OKR.
So you're going to have a lot more KPIs than you do OKRs, but OKRs are the guiding light for your programs, and then KPIs are, let me track everything that I can in reference to it. Okay.
Right.
Kyle, what would you say?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. You are thinking about your OKR at a little bit of a higher level, thinking about, how they're going to, if you accomplish these things, they're going to help you to contribute over to your goal over that time period. Your KPIs could be a lot of things that you're tracking over that period of time. And they're usually KPIs are going to help you spot problems or challenges a lot faster than an OKR might.
Okay. So our step 1, we said, was giving everyone an alignment on the mission. Our step 2, we're saying, are defining what are your top 5 programs. Laura, Devika, do you have any comments and insights on that? Your action items, everyone, is to start thinking about what are your top objectives and key results. Devika, do you have any other suggestions as they're making their OKRs?
In terms of how to think about what they should be.
Yeah.
Really aligning it with the mission. So thinking through what makes you unique, how you are trying to address the issues. And again, sometimes we think about it with like 3 circles and what makes you unique, what's possible in terms of your capacity, and also external environment, like what does the external environment need that you can serve?
That is a good framework. Thank you. And Laura?
I don't have much to expand on what was said.
Okay.
I think using a lot of terminology can sometimes get people who are starting out at this very bogged down. So if you just think in terms of, the OKRs are just broad organizational goals, and the KPIs are tracking shorter term progress spurts of activity, to keep people accountable to getting to achieving those broader goals.
Okay. Thank you. I like that term change in terminology. You're right. It will scare more people less if we use simple terms. So if we're going to use a methodology of what are your broader goals? Do you have the terminology? Do you have those 5 broader goals for your organization? Just put in the chat like where you are, if you have those developed, if you're working on them, if you have any specific questions about this, because then we're going to jump into more of the KPIs, which are more actionable. The strategy tends to be more non-actionable. It's more the change you want to see happen. As we break it down into bits and pieces, that's how we take it from theory and put it more into action. So we just want to make sure as we break down those layers that we're doing each layer right, so we get to the right direction. So how are you all doing with your OKR/broader objectives? No comments? Okay, well, it will be part of your, oh, there we go. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Karen. That is a good question. How problematic is it that OKRs are dependent on externals? Which panelist would like to answer that one?
I would be careful about that if you want to tie it more to things that you actually have some ability to control. I think it's important to think about your external environment, of course, and adjustments to your strategy or your goals as the external environment is changing. That's why it's good to have, some shorter term objectives like quarterly. But really, I would more encourage you to have levers and objectives that are more targeted towards things that you can move forward.
Okay, so it's what you have control over is what you should be trying to do. The KPIs, which are more on the ground, are how you're performing it, but we want to see how much you put out there. You can never control the world around you, but you can control yourself, kind of thing. Okay, so the next thing I want you to think about, again, before jumping into the KPIs, are what are your key programming? So you should be able to list off what your key programs in your organization are. My question to you is, which OKR or more do they support? That way you can decide or determine if you have a program that's really supporting all your goals, or if maybe it's not really supporting any of your key goals. I've worked with organizations that had big programs that really had nothing to do with their key goals, and we switched them because that was really a not effective use of resources. If their goal is to make change X happen and they're focusing on something else, that's a distraction. And sometimes you have to take that step back to realize that what you've been doing for 5 years actually isn't what you're doing. Ideally, everything that you're doing should feed back towards your overall goals, which feeds back towards your mission. That is a good question. How do we evaluate if your OKRs are good? Panel, tell me, what do you think? How do we evaluate if the OKRs are good?
So one thing is, do you have a clear mechanism to actually check in and update their progress? Like, if you don't know whether you're actually making progress on those key results or that OKR, then it's probably not a good one. So measurability is a really important one, I would say.
Okay.
Yes, and adding, thank you, Kyle, and adding for me the most important question that I try to do is, for example, is this objective inspiring and ambitious for the team? Because sometimes we set some objectives that we know that we can get all the 100%. Another question could be if we achieve this objective, will it truly make a significant impact? Or is this objective limited to a specific time frame? Because sometimes we think that we can do it, but when we thought about the calendar, the planning, we saw that the time frame is longer. Could be some questions.
Those are good
I
questions.
second that, Sarah. That's a really good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to get into the KPIs, which are the details. This is really how are you doing this? Every little thing that you can measure. And as Kyle touched on, we want to do annual planning. We want to do quarterly planning. We want when I look at it, you can get down to daily planning also. But the more time focused you get, the smaller the time period is, the more detailed it's going to be and the less strategic. So think about it. We have a proportion of theory to action. If you're thinking about an annual plan, it's high in theory and we have KPIs, but less actionable items directly. When we're working with a monthly plan, it's going to be highly detailed with action supporting the theory, but we're not changing any of the theory. So talk to me about KPIs. Again, our key performance indicators, these are the numbers, these are the things that we are measuring. How do we take the vision and create the KPI? So we have the vision, we have the OKRs, we have the programs that are associated with them, we're measuring those. How do I break that down into KPIs? And what's a good KPI versus a bad KPI?
I'll throw out something that might be a little controversial,
Okay, we like that.
which is I have found that AI is actually helpful for this. And AI can, be useful and not useful, but oftentimes with an organization, you're kind of staring at a blank screen and not sure. I would say that when you're thinking about KPIs and metrics for an organization, it would be a good place it could be a good place to get your juices flowing around what to think about. Again, AI is only as helpful as it's tailored to you. So you don't want to just ask it vague questions. You want to ask it very specific prompts, and you want to show information about your organization, your strategy, your vision, your mission, your programs, and what you're thinking about. And so sometimes we will use it to just share, different perspectives and different KPIs that you can then whittle down and edit or, help you think about other perspectives.
I do like that. I will also add on to the caution. Don't ask it to create your mission. Don't ask it how to run your business. It's not that smart yet. I've seen too many people like give me here, this is my business plan generated by ChatGPT, and I'm looking at it. It's like, did you actually read this? Like, this really doesn't make sense from what you've told me. But if you feed it the right things, yeah, it can be great with that. All right.
One set of KPIs that you can use that you have to be careful with is basically things related to sort of staff time or like where people are spending their time. Because on the one hand, if you're treating, how much hours people are putting in, that can easily be a bad KPI because it doesn't translate necessarily into impact in your work. On the other hand, it can be useful if you are looking at the allocation of people's time on certain projects versus others, right? So if you have certain priorities and when your timesheets or whatever you use to track your time, and you're finding that most people are spending their time on the things that are not your priorities, then that's a suggestion that an indication that you probably are not directing your time effectively to actually pushing your goals. So it is a fine line. It can be a bad indicator or a bad KPI too, but in places it can be really good in terms of time allocation and budget.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what we're saying is that we want to directly track things that are translating to impact, not the things that people are doing, but the things that people are producing. So it's not that I sat at my computer for 100 hours. It's that either I contributed 100 hours towards this research project, which we're looking at, or we came out with 3 research papers. Okay. All right. Sarah, would you have anything more to add with that?
No, only to show the put a post in the chat, and I think that is a really good tip that AI can be helpful, but is in order to improve, no? But the basics ideas, as you mentioned, no, the mission, the vision, we must do thinking in a team, no? And sometimes we decide the KPIs or the OKRs only like for an eyes, but you need to see the big picture.
That is very true. So now my question with KPIs are, how much is too much and how much is too little? How many should I have? Is it the more the merrier, or do I pick like 10? Or I'm assuming I'm doing them each per program, right? Which of you wants to take that?
I'll just add, I'm not going to answer that question, but I'll also,
Okay.
you can also have an organizational OKR. So it doesn't necessarily all have to be programs. You could also think about organization-wide, where do we want to be and what change do we want to have, and track that too.
I would say that we need to have that on the organizational level, and that the OKRs are probably not program specific. It's just, are the programming supporting the OKR? So you're right. The OKRs should be living on the organizational level. But Laura, Sarah, do you have input into how many I should be having?
I don't think, at least in my
Precise
experience, that there's
Go ahead.
not a magic number, but I don't
Mhm.
think you want to have more assigned to any one person or project than is reasonable to track. So, what are the priorities? And just like in any other part of planning, are they clear? Do we have the cadence for how often we're going to check on them? And is the team committed to their success? And like I said, I really liked what Sarah said about, are they the highest, most important ones to advance the mission? And I think that is where you'll decide how many you need, because they're
Okay.
not all going to be the most important to getting to that higher level goal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So now that we know what we're trying to check, we know what we're trying to do, now we can move into the problem of capacity. There is just a limit to how much we can get done on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, from the organization with however much resources we have. So everything feels urgent. How then do we make decisions to choose one thing over another when everything feels urgent? How do we say no to things that sound great, but they don't really fit your strategy? How do we evaluate? Do you have a platform? Do you have suggestions? What do you do? What do you advise?
So a couple things here that I would recommend is, first, to just take a breath and think about all of the urgent things that are in front of you, and write it down, and actually write it down sometimes on paper. One of the things we've seen with coaching is that if you write on paper as opposed to on a Word doc, it just opens up other portals of your brain. And then think about how all of these tasks relate to your mission and to your strategic priorities. And one way you can think about urgent versus important, people talk about the Eisenhower matrix, which is what is important versus what is urgent, and thinking about long-term impact. So I'll find a link and stick it in the chat. But the Eisenhower matrix can be really important, or really helpful for distinguishing the urgent from the important, because everything that's urgent isn't necessarily important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a great tip. I'm going to send that out also. Any other tips of how to choose?
Yes, another tip could be to define what is the impact and the effort, because sometimes we say this is urgent, everything is urgent, everything is important, but what's the potential impact of completing or not completing this key result or this KPI, What is the potential impact and how much effort will it require, How many hours, we need the resources, we need to maybe to get a new supplier and focus on high impact, low effort tasks first, then high impact, and then high effort.
Yeah, that's kind of like a matrix I've advised people to use a lot, which is where we specify, okay, what are our OKRs, our key goals, and I list those out. So if you have an Excel or Google Sheets, you're listing out your programs in the rows, and then the columns are how much does it affect your overall impact. And you can add them, multiply them. I think multiplying is usually the most suggested to see which ones are the most high impact. And then correspondingly, we can have columns for how much cost is it? How much money does it cost you? How much staff time does it cost you? So that you can make those trade-offs. When you can clearly break them down into numbers, and I really usually encourage people to update this at least on a quarterly basis, looking at all their programs. How much does this align with what we're trying to do? And you can see what are my most high impact opportunities that are going to push my mission forward. I personally am a victim of shiny object syndrome, which is that I have so many ideas and I want to make them all happen, but I can't. So I don't let myself start new things until the beginning of the month. And then I can evaluate, does this fit into my monthly plan? If we operate from a sense of urgency, we're going to be very misdirected. Our bodies aren't good at strategizing, but our minds are. So we have to make that place for it. So I would suggest as a homework item, we want everybody to make some kind of decision matrix. I do have a sample of the kind I use. I'm happy to share that. If it's helpful, again, it's just a number metric system of being able to choose what's important for you. Okay, so now that you're going to be thinking about it and start thinking about how you want to structure that, sometimes it is important to pivot, that our strategy, what we were doing, doesn't make sense now 3 months later, or we had a new president elected and that changes certain things. So when do we know is it time to switch, or do we stick to what we're doing? We just need to get through this hard spot. Or when do we reevaluate and say, you know what, this program's just not worth it anymore?
Performance indicators that you are seeing those go in a bad direction, and you've already made adjustments to your strategies and tactics to try to recover from that, and they're still going in a bad direction, then that is one potential indicator that your overall strategy actually needs some adjustments.
Okay, so you have the KPIs. KPIs are not doing well. Aren't doing well. You've tried to compensate and it's not working. All right, what else would you all add?
It could be that an opportunity comes up. It could be situational where, you're making a pivot for a really positive reason. There's a new scenario, you acquired a business, something like that. So there's always room to pivot. And I think that's why, we're not talking about strategic planning where you do it once a year and you put it away. We're talking about planning that you build and think about and build on at least quarterly, if not monthly, so that you can take advantage of opportunities. And you're also aware, hopefully through your scenario strategizing, of risks and threats, and those early warning signs, like Kyle said, would be not meeting, the KPIs or OKRs that you've set forward.
Thanks, Laura. It's a good one.
Laura touched on scenario planning, and that's something that a lot of clients that we work with have been doing in the last couple months because the nonprofit sector is in such change, disarray, crisis for many. So one of the key things that I'd recommend there around scenario planning is to just think about those best and worst case scenarios for your organization, because it's much better to think through those best and worst case scenarios when you have some space to do it than when they come. And sometimes when you, again, sit down and write it all down and think through it, it's not as bad, or at least you have some options that you can start implementing now. So I'll put a link in the chat to just a post we wrote about this on LinkedIn that walks you through the 7 steps of scenario planning.
Thank you. That sounds useful. Let's see, we have a comment. Yeah, sometimes other organizations come in and they're doing a niche well. Having collaborators is great. When we're trying to do something, you don't need to be the only one trying to make something happen. Working with other people can make your impact have a much stronger reach. So yeah, that goes back to what Laura was saying about opportunities. If an opportunity comes up to partner, that might give you a chance to reevaluate and say, can we make our mission go further? Can we be closer to what our true goals are? Sarah, do you have any other inputs?
Well, the case that you mentioned I think that are the most the more current or the most common. Another case could be when we think that some OKR or KPI could be redundancy. So we have, or maybe we have difficulty or high cost of measurement, for example, could be a case. And I call it the vanity metric, no? Because some organizations want a lot of KPIs, OKRs, but then when we start to see in the Microsoft goals, I use Microsoft goals or Sugar OKRs to track the improvement. Is every KR 5 minutes, and when you have 10, 20 KRs, it's like 100 minutes, and you don't have time, no? So sometimes you must leave.
Okay. So that gets into my next question, which is software. Like, how do we make this process easy for people? Do we use Excel sheets, templates, software? What exists to help us?
Well, as I mentioned, in my case, I have experience with Microsoft Goals for OKRs and Sugar OKR that I will put in the chat. The Sugar OKR is free, but every time that a client asks this question, I say there are a lot of systems, but the best system is that one that works for you, because you can have Microsoft Goals or another. There are a lot of software, but if you don't use it, if you don't have time, you don't have resources to show it, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay. Any other tools that you're all using, or we just like what Sarah said?
Yeah, I think you want to go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
+1 what Sarah said, which is everybody, has something different, and the best tool is the one that you're going to use. And no point in downloading or paying for something that does this, but nobody wants to use it, or it's additional obstacle to get into the system. And so there's so many out there: Excel, Monday, Asana. There's lots of options. Ideally, if it's something you're already using and you can incorporate this into it, there's a higher likelihood that you'll follow through.
Yeah. Okay. So now another question. We have different people in the organization with competing priorities or competing ambitions. How do we get feedback from different people and hear what everybody wants to go without paralyzing you into doing nothing? And I think a bunch of people in the chat mentioned about that as well. How do we manage the different inputs so that we're all aligned?
I think one of the reasons why most strategic planning starts with an offsite retreat of some kind is to take people out of their normal business brains, to put them into a place where they can openly share and strategize and get creative and get into a different frame of mind for collaboration, and for coming together and having buy-in on the output of it. So I think that's part of it that's really, really important from the onset, from the inception. And I think it helps, as you roll out to not get overwhelmed. And by the same token, by having these guiding principles, it hopefully takes some of the stress away from then the measuring steps or creating those metrics that come later. So that's just one suggestion.
That is useful. Let's go back to the beginning. We need to get everybody in alignment. All right. Last question, and then we'll move to the QA. So prepare your questions if you have them. If I were going to take one action item, I'm a big fan of like the one thing mentality. What is the one thing that I can do that's going to make everything else much easier? What is one action step someone can take this week to strengthen their organizational strategy?
So even if you find a lot of what we've talked about to be very overwhelming, a very basic thing you can do with no software or anything else is just get in the habit of doing a daily prioritization of your work or your team's work.
Okay, so that is one piece of advice from Kyle. Thank you.
In my case, I will suggest to check the alignment, asking the question, does this directly support a high level company or department objective, no? To trying to check this alignment.
How often are we checking alignment?
What?
Or just this week? We're just going through all our programs to check alignment.
Yes, to check if this
Okay.
KPI or KR is alignment with a high level vision of the company of the team. No, maybe we have KPIs that don't impact.
That don't impact that. Okay. All right. That's a good homework assignment. So in your follow-up email in a week from now, I want to hear how many of you did that. Rebecca?
I would say it's just very important to stay focused on your mission and making sure that you're making mission aligned decisions.
Okay. So make mission. So if I would turn that into something practical, how am I making sure that I do that? Am I asking myself questions? Am I looking back on the day? Am I planning for the day to make sure it's mission aligned?
When you're making decisions for the organization, maybe coming up with a set of like 3 questions you ask yourself to make sure that they're mission aligned in terms of how you're making the decision.
Okay. So we're going to create a set of 3 questions that you can ask yourself. Okay. Laura?
I would just say not to get too overwhelmed in all of the new ideas that you're going to take away from this today, and to keep taking action, and not overthinking it. I like the idea of what Sarah said about asking yourself, is this leading to achieving the overall strategy? That's a very simple thing that you can just start thinking strategically. And I find even in my own business, sometimes the things I'm most excited about doing are not the things that are going to be driving the strategy. And I'm spending time where it feels good. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And on an organizational level, when you expand that, you can see how it could take you away from strategically moving forward.
So if I would consolidate what you all just said, I would say that make the question so that you have those 3 sets of questions that you can ask yourself to see the set of 3 questions. Just ask yourself to make sure it's mission aligned. Ask yourself that for your programs, your KPIs, your OKRs. And then create the time for strategy check-ins to really make sure that you're staying on track. And that would be the road, hopefully, out of here. All right. Thank you. This is great content and hopefully very helpful to all of you. Now it is time for our audience. If you have questions, you can raise your hand. You can post it in the chat. We do have the 2 that came in before, so we can start with those. But please let us know, anyone else, if you have questions. One question was, what is a single resource you'd recommend to facilitate the creation of an organizational strategy document? Ideally, it would be a walkthrough document that asks relevant questions and give examples. Do we have that? What would you say? I know we touched on some of those points. I
mean, if you ask me, I think it should be specific to an organization. So I don't know that a tool necessarily is going to do that for you. A good place to start and set that up for yourself, if you're looking for a free tool, Trello can be good for, setting out your mission, vision, and values, and then quarterly, how you're going to meet your strategic objectives.
So really, it's probably back to what Sarah said, whatever works for you, whatever you're going to use.
100%.
Okay. All right. Question in the audience. Is there any way to measure the cost of not doing? So I'm blanking on the term. Kyle, you can probably help me with this.
Counterfactual.
Counterfactual. Thank you. How do you measure the counterfactuals if you wouldn't exist? Is that an important thing for the OKR? It probably is, because that's going to convince funders. But Kyle, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, there's a couple things you can do here. I mean, it is hard to know. So obviously, accepting that you won't be able to fully predict the alternative universe is part of this. But a couple things you can do. One is to say, if another organization came in and did what we're doing much better, how would they do it? And if you are not seeing a realistic organization or group that could do that, then that's a pretty good indication that you might be doing something that is quite important, and that you not existing is bad. But on the other hand, if you can easily create a scenario where another organization that could realistically be there is coming in and doing this work, then there's maybe a stronger argument that you might not be filling the most important niche that's out there. Another thing is to be asking, what would your team be doing if they weren't doing the things that they're working on today? And what that can indicate is maybe not necessarily that your organization shouldn't exist, but that you ought to have a different focus than you have today. So what could your team be dedicating its resources and talents to if it wasn't the thing that you're doing right now?
Okay, great. All right. Any other questions? Another question that came in, I think we answered this one. That strategic discussions are abstract and high level. And how do you turn that into clear, concrete, and actionable? So I think we went through the process for that. So hopefully this session answered that question.
Well, could be to put in a paper, no? When you put all your abstract ideas, for that OKRs, I think that is perfect, because you can have this big goal, no? Something that is inspiring, that like a moonshot, and then you put, and then you must think, okay, I know what I want, but then how I get that, no? And then you must identify what are these key results, and then you start to put in like then the projects, no? So when you start to think to question, how can I get this big goal that I have, and putting in numbers, in metrics, and how I can get to increase, to reduce, to improve, you can get this putting these abstract ideas in operation, in action.
Some people are written word people, some people are talking people, some people are visual people. I'm a visual one. Everybody works better when they write or do something to get the information out. It's not in your head. It connects your left brain and your right brain, and you'll find you'll have much more creativity. All right, Julia, not a question. Common mistakes. So defining only lagging indicators that confirm trends and success after the fact. So yes, we want lead indicators that are closer to the beginning. So that's when you're creating the KPIs. So we want quantitative and qualitative things, however you can measure it. And you definitely want the teams, everybody's work should be connecting somehow to the OKR. Yeah, and that should be something that you're just implementing. Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions, and thanks, Julia, for that. I will let you all go. Thank you all for being a part of this. We do have 4 more webinars coming up. Our next one is going to be on HR and leadership. So we'll be sending out, if you're not already signed up, I'll send that link out also for you to register for that. If you have any questions about organizational strategy for either one of our panelists, I will put all their contact information in the email, and I'm always available if anybody just wants to chat. for whatever's going on in their organization. So good luck to you all. And thank you so much again to our panelists for joining and for this great content. And good luck making your organizations successful and powerful.
Thanks, Dina.
Thank you, Dina, for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.